often I begin with 5 or 10 minutes of an intro. I've put my intro onto YouTube. It's a 20-minute intro, so I won't take the time now. If you're interested, you can follow it. If you're on my distribution list, you received it last night, the link. And if you're not on my distribution list, drop me an email after we're done and ask me to be on the distribution list. I'll be sure to put you on. So in very brief, rather than my 20-minute version, I'm against the agreement, as I think a lot of us are, and it's a disaster. Israel in the Gilad Shalit deal gave up 1,000 Arab murderers for one person whose soul is precious and all of that, absolutely. But those 1,000 that were given up included Yahya Sinwar, who went on to build Hamas into what it is, others who set off the Intifada, one of them, and at least 2,000 people died as a result of the Gilad Shalit deal. So one precious life was saved and 2,000 precious lives were lost, even more. October 7 from Yahya Sinwar, that's 2,000 lives right there. The 1,200 on October 7, Simchat Torah of 2023, and the 800 soldiers. And likewise, the Intifadas. So, and then there was another one in the year 1985, the Jibril deal. They gave up 1,150 Arab murderers for three people. Again, same result. So the rest of it I've got out there, and I've got my theories about why Netanyahu would do something so disastrous, and just guesses, and that's about it. It's already more I wanted to say now, because
אחינו כל בית ישראל, אחינו כל בית ישראל, הנתונים בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה. אחינו כל בית ישראל, אחינו כל בית ישראל, הנתונים בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה. המקום ירחם עליהם ויוציאם מצרה לרווחה, ומאפלה לאורה ומשעבוד לגאולה, השתה בגלה ובזמן קריב. המקום ירחם עליהם ויוציאם מצרה לרווחה, ומאפלה לאורה ומשעבוד לגאולה, השתה בגלה ובזמן קריב.
this clip has no sound. This clip also has no sound. It's the first moments back of the 3 hostages who were released today. Thank God, God knows what they've been through, but thank God they look, that like whatever they've been through, they can be rehabilitated. Psychologically, what they've been through, no one can imagine. But they're not emaciated, even if they had been and now have been fattened up by Hamas or whatever. The idea is the 3 of them don't look like the
290 רוצחים עם דם על הידיים,
290 murderers with blood on their hands.
ובהם
This is Channel 11, Israel's PBS, their public broadcaster. And among them are men who are responsible for the most severe terrorist actions.
האנשים שהיו אחראים לפיגועים הכי קשים שהיו כאן. חלקם רבי מרצחים שאחראים במצטבר למוות.
Some of these murderers are responsible for hundreds of Israelis having been murdered.
של מאות ישראלים. בין השמות הבולטים, זכריה זביידי, אחמד
Now the reporter is mentioning certain of the individuals among those who will be released in the first phase, telling you their names and what they've done.
ברגותי ומחמוד עטאלה, שנאשם באונס סוערת בכלא.
These 2 bastards have been in prison, life sentences. That's for someone like me who has become hardened and cynical, and I'm not the only one. I get so disgusted when I do read in the media, the Israeli papers, after time they get themselves a Arab murderer with blood on his hands, and you read that the guy's been sentenced to 6 life sentences. And by now I've become so cynical about it. 6 life sentences will be let free soon enough.
זה המחיר הכבד של העסקה שתצא לפועל החל ממחר, בעבור החזרת 33 חטופים.
And this is the severe price we're paying in order to get back 33 hostages.
הרשימה הזו התפרסמה זמן קצר לאחר תום ישיבת הממשלה אתמול ב-2 בלילה, ויש בה כמה שמות בולטים שמעשיהם זכורים לכל ישראלי.
There are certain names on that list of people being Arabs, murderers being freed, whose names are particularly stand out because of particularly harsh terrorist actions they did.
עשרות צעירים בילו באותה שעה בקפה מומנט, לידם התפוצץ המחבל.
בסך הכל ישוחררו 734 אסירים, מהם 290 רוצחים אסירי עולם, ונוסף אליהם 1,000 עצירים עזתים שנעצרו.
So they're letting out 290 who have been sentenced to life in prison for murder, plus 1,000 other Gazans who have been arrested and brought into Israel to be incarcerated in return for 734. Oh, in all, they're letting out 734.
עצרו במהלך התמרון ולא היו מעורבים בטבח 7 באוקטובר.
What they do have in common is none of them was involved in the October 7 massacre. The most heavy of all that they're letting out is Val Qasem, whatever his name is, Abbasi.
החבל הכבד ביותר הוא ואיל קאסם איסם אבאסי, ראש חוליית סילואן של חמאס, שאחראי...
He's been the head of the Silwan battalion of Hamas, who's responsible for murdering 35 Israelis.
לרצח של 35 ישראלים, בין היתר בפיגוע הזכור בקפה מומנט בירושלים באינתיפאדה השנייה בתחילת שנות ה-2000, ובקפיטריה באוניברסיטה העברית.
He's particularly remembered for blowing up a particular cafe and the Hebrew University cafeteria.
שם בולט נוסף הוא אחמד ברגותי, עוזרו הקרוב של מרואן ברגותי, שנידון ל13 מאסרי עולם.
Another one, the worst bastard is Marwan Barghouti. Currently he's not being let out, but this other one is a relative of his, a Barghouti, who has been sentenced to 3 life sentences without parole.
הוא הורשע בין היתר בשליחת המחבלים לפיגועים במסעדת סיפוד מרקט בתל אביב במרץ 2002.
There was a bombing of the seafood market in Tel Aviv.
ובאחד הפיגועים הקטלניים ברחוב יפו בירושלים בשנות ה-2000.
חמוש ברובה M16 ארוך, המטיר המחבל אש תופת לעבר מסעדת הסיפוד.
That's a clip from the moment of the terror activity back then when he murdered.
פוד מרקט.
ברשימת המשוחררים גם איברהים סלאח שרצח את מנחם שטרן, אלי אמסלם וחוסיין זייד בשנות ה-90.
Another guy who murdered 3 and they named the 3 back in 1990. And now another guy who who stabbed to death Ari Fuld, which was a major national story at its time. Ari Fuld was a giant in the community of Judea and Samaria.
וחליל יוסוף ג'בארין שרצח בדקירות את ארי פולד בפיגוע בגוש עציון ב-2018.
احنا فيش عندنا مشكله ان نعطي قلوبنا لاي شعب في العالم حتى يهودي ولكن اذا بضل مصر على الاحتلال راح نشيل قلبه وقلب ابوه كمان.
ויש עוד שם שמוכר מאוד לציבור הישראלי והפלסטיני.
And yet another who's well known to both Jews and he's saying Palestinians. There is no such thing as Palestine or Palestinians. They're Arabs. Zachariah Zavidi, who is the head of the battalion of
זכריה זביידי, מראשי גדודי חללי אל-אקצא, שרק לפני 3 שנים הביא להקפצת כוחות בהיקף עצום, לאחר שהצליח לברוח מכלא גלבוע עם 5
He had broken out of prison in the Gilboa prison together with 5 other terrorists.
מחבלים נוספים. הוא נלכד כעבור 5 ימים בתום מצוד רחב היקף, והנה עכשיו משוחרר בעסקה לחופשי. גם מחמוד...
And here this guy who had broken out of prison, it was a national manhunt to find him and the 4 other bastards, and then they were caught and put back into prison, and now he's just walking out.
מחמוד ארדה, מראשי הג'יהאד האסלאמי שברח יחד איתו, ישוחרר בעסקה. ישראל התעקשה שחלק מהרוצחים ישוחררו לחו"ל למדינות כמו טורקיה או קטאר, אבל בהסכם נקבע כי חלק מהם ישוחררו לירושלים ויהודה ושומרון.
Some of these animals are being released into Judea and Samaria.
אחד מהרוצחים שישוחררו לביתם בשכם הוא מחמוד עטאללה, שנאשם גם באונס סוהרת במסגרת מה שכונה
This bastard raped a female Israeli prison guard who was assigned to watch her. And that had major ramifications on Israel's entire prison guard system and the cutting out of women prison guards.
פרשת הסרסור בסוהרות. הסוהרות נדהמו לגלות הבוקר כי דווקא הוא לא יגורש, וישוחרר מרחק שעה נסיעה מביתם. וזאת, למרות שהשמיע כלפיהם איומים ספציפיים בחקירה, לרבות בעימות שהוקלט. הן פנו בפנייה דחופה לשר הביטחון.
הסוהרות מכלא גלבוע התעוררו היום לסיוט. מה הם ירגישו עכשיו כשהוא...
And this is someone who, Miatzeket HaSoharot, is an attorney who, I guess, represents the Arab prisoners. What are they going to feel now that he's going to Shechem, to Nablus, as the Arabs call it in Samaria?
חוזר לשכם. אי אפשר להסכים לזה, חייבים לגרש אותו, ולא לתת לו לפגוע חלילה באף...
So you ask yourself, if she was representing Arab murderers, typically it's not like in the United States where a judge orders an attorney to represent a criminal in order to provide, you know, that famous thing about you have the right to be silent, anything you say will be used against you, yada, yada, yada. So in that context, if you need an attorney will provide it for you. So in the United States, it can happen where an attorney who does not want to represent someone or other can be ordered by the judge. You have to do it. Someone's got to do it, and now it's your turn. In Israel, the ones who represent the Arab terrorists typically are, if not outright sympathetic with them, are extreme leftists. Think Bernie Sanders, think George Soros, think Ben and Jerry. They have Jews like that in Israel too. The fact that you have such a woman who's represented them opposed to this guy going free, well, that's surprising because leftists normally are not going to give a damn about the Israel national security situation. But because she's a feminist, she's opposed to a rapist being let loose because he'll be a danger to other women.
אישה בישראל.
לצד הזעזוע משמות המחבלים שישראל נאלצת לשחרר, יש רשימה לא פחות חשובה של המחבלים שישראל הצליחה להשאיר כרגע בתוך הכלא, כפי שפרסם כאן.
The guy is saying, at least on the other hand, there are certain Arab prisoners that Israel so far has been able to resist pressure to release.
אמש אליאור לוי, ישראל התעקשה והצליחה להוציא מההסכם את מרואן ברגותי, עבדאללה ברגותי.
So he's listing some of the most notorious Arab murderers whom Israel has made absolutely clear, even as they're capitulating up and down and left and right, on these guys, presently they won't let them out no matter what.
עבאס הסייד, אברהים חמד וחסן סלאמה, רבי מרצחים שסומנו כמנהיגים הבאים של ארגוני הטרור. על פי הערכות
While you hear Arabs screaming, Allahu Akbar, celebrating this.
בג"ץ צפוי לדחות את כל העתירות על שחרור המחבלים על הסף, כפי שהיה בעסקאות קודמות. המשמעות שהשחרור יחל כבר מחר בצהריים.
כך בחרו
The demonstration against the release of these people in Israel. Symbolically, they prepared 12 coffins with Israeli flags over them, representing all the new deaths that are going to emerge from this.
המתנגדים לביצוע עסקת החטופים הנוכחית להביע את מחאתם.
This also from channel 11, the public broadcaster, and here again they've created all these mock coffins representing as part of their protest.
ארונות קבורה מדומים שהוצבו סמוך למשרד ראש הממשלה.
Demonstration taking place close to the office of the Prime Minister,
מוחשית למה שצפוי לקרות עם
conveying what is bound to happen as a result of this.
העסקה במתווה הקיים תצא לפועל.
אורי בני היה בתוך ארון כזה.
My son Uri had been killed, murdered by Hamas. My son Uri has been in one of those coffins, maybe not literally that coffin, but that situation.
עבורי זה לא היה מיצג, ועבור קרוב ל-900 חללי צה"ל זה לא היה מיצג.
For me, whose son has been in one of those, this is not simply a symbolic gesture of coffins. And for the nearly 900 Israeli soldiers who have been dead, who have been killed, murdered, this is not just symbolic.
אנחנו לא רוצים שעבור אזרחים
We don't want future Israeli citizens to end up in coffins like these.
נוספים, זאת תהיה המציאות הכואבת שלהם.
And this is going to be the result, the painful result of this deal.
והעסקה הזו תביא לתוצאה של המיצג הזה חס ושלום.
מאתמול בלילה התמקמו בני משפחות שכולות ובני משפחות חטופים מול משרד ראש הממשלה בכוונה לדרוש בתוקף מהשרים שלא להיכנע ללחצים ולא לתמוך בעסקה.
People demonstrating against the deal and pleading with the government ministers not to agree to it.
כל יהודי, כל ישראלי רוצה את כל החטופים כאן ועכשיו וכמה שיותר.
Look, certainly every Israeli, every Jew wants all the kidnapped hostages to go free now and as fast as possible, but
מהר. אבל האחריות לביטחון האומה, האחריות לחטופים שישארו,
but the responsibility for the security of the nation and for those who already have been freed is on you, the ministers, the prime minister, all the members of the government.
עליכם ראש הממשלה וכל חברי הממשלה שהולכים להצביע על העסקה.
מחבל משוחרר, הרוצח של מחר. מחבל משוחרר, every terrorist being freed, רוצח למחר, is tomorrow's murderer.
אנחנו לא מוכנים לשמוע על פעימות, אנחנו לא מוכנים לשמוע שמחבלים חוזרים למקומות וחוזרים לחטוף עוד אזרחים, אנחנו לא מוכנים לשמוע שחיילים נהרגים על סתם.
We're not prepared to have to listen to all the news that's coming up about these people are going to be freed and then they're going to be killing again.
פורום תקווה ופורום הגבורה ממארגני המחאה ניהלו זמן רב מאבק נגד עסקה חלקית, והיה נדמה להם שראש הממשלה איתם לאורך כל הדרך.
גם אם אחרי היה במתווה אני לא הייתי מסכים, מהסיבה הפשוטה, אף אמא לא יותר טובה מהאמא השנייה, ואנחנו לא בזמן משפט שלו.
No mother is more precious than any other mother. And as precious as are the mothers who've been holding demonstrations to free their children who have been taken hostage, there are the mothers of those who will be murdered in the future. No mother is more important than any other mother.
ואנחנו לא בשעה שיש סלקציה.
החזרת החטופים.
There's another issue on the table as well that you may not be aware of. With 98 hostages being held by the Arab dirtbags and 33 coming home, there was an element of which 33 are coming home and which 65 are not. That is to say, not only are there people opposed to the deal on grounds that I have described several times of what it's going to lead to in the future in the more classic concern. There are families that feel that if their kids were among the 65 who have not been included together with the 33 of the 98, there's a very strong feeling that because this deal did not free all of them, all 98, it's almost a guarantee that the other 65 never will come home.
אמורה להיות החזרת חטופים במלואה, עסקה כוללת, עסקה אחראית, עסקה
It's got to be an entire deal, this guy is saying.
שמשאירה ותחזיר את התושבים לדרום, תיתן את הביטחון, זה עסקה. עסקה כזאת.
If you want a deal, you get everybody out. That's a deal. But a deal like this one, that's partial, this is neither here nor there.
זאת שמה היא עושה? היא לא לפה ולא לשם, עסקה שמחלישה אותנו, עסקה שהחמאס מבין שהוא יכול לסחוט אותנו בפעם הבאה עוד יותר.
Now this is a deal that's simply going to allow Hamas to turn around afterward and further squeeze out of us more for the other 65.
אחר הצהריים בכותל המערבי נערכה תפילה המונית למען עסקה שתכלול את כל החטופים.
There was a mass prayer service at the Kotel in the afternoon the other day, praying for a deal that will get all of them out, not only some.
בקרב משפחות חטופים שמתנגדות לעסקה, התחושות של רשימות החטופים שיחזרו יוצרות חששות כבדים מגורלם של אלו שישארו שם.
במידה ויעשו את
I'm going to move forward. It's very passionate, but for time and everything, I'll move forward.
הדבר הזאת שהם קוראים לעסקה.
Protest.
The Israeli government does a coalition that's comprised of many parties, about 5 or 6 parties. There's Likud, there's 2 religious parties, United Torah Judaism, which itself is made of 2 parties, Degel HaTorah and Agudat Yisrael, and then there's the Sephardi religious party, Shas, and then there's a fellow named Gideon Sa'ar who came in with 4 Knesset members. And then there's the 2 so-called right-wing parties, the religious Zionist party that's headed by Smotrich, and the Otzma Yehudit party that's led by Ben Gvir. And Ben Gvir is the one who gets all this hostile treatment because he's the most right-wing. And so left-wing media tag him basically as a Nazi, which is just like what left-wing media in the United States have done to Trump, where for all the things that legitimately can be said in criticism of Trump, they just go without any limits whatsoever. So in the same way, that's how they describe Ben Gvir. Ben Gvir basically has taken his party. They had announced that if this deal does go into actual implementation, his party will leave the government. The government needs 61 seats. There's 120 seats in the Knesset, and they need 61 to have a majority. They currently have 68, and Ben Gvir this morning announced they've quit the government. So if one more party, whether Smotrich or the religious, if one more party will quit the government will collapse. They no longer will have 61 votes. The opposition will bring a motion of no confidence. The government won't be able to survive it, and there'll have to be new elections. Presently, the way they're playing it is Ben Gvir has pulled out of the government, and the other one, Smotrich, voted against the deal, but the deal was going to pass because although there were only, let's say, 54 votes in favor from the coalition, having lost 13 votes or whatever, they were able to get all the opposition voted for it. The Arabs voted for it, the left-wingers voted for it. But if one more party actually pulls out of the coalition, the government fails. So Smotrich has taken the position that he will pull out if there's 3 phases in this deal, and if the second phase leads to any more concessions, then he will pull out of the government also. He's waiting to see what happens with the second, since the first phase is a fait accompli.
Once again taking over the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. After months of calling for a ceasefire and hostages deal in Gaza, family members and loved ones of the 98 hostages still being held captive warned against the phased deal that is currently being negotiated between Israel and Hamas.
Deal is a horrible deal. It's a tragedy. It means abandoning the hostages that are not released in this step. It means releasing thousands of terrorists that are only going to go back to their terrorist ways. There is absolutely no good that's going to come out of such a deal.
As negotiations to close the deal are reportedly nearing a breakthrough, Israel is split. As it stands, the deal will see the release of the hostages in phases. Many worry the rest will never make it home.
Does anyone know her? Of course not. Do you know why? Because she doesn't get enough publicity. Because they don't arrange media for us. Do you understand why the Families Forum doesn't represent us? No one represents us at the headquarters. We represent ourselves, and that's how things should be seen. By the way, Inbar is one of 30 kidnapped women who are in Gaza. All the kidnapped women are being returned except for Inbar. One of 13 women. Do you know why? Because they are not fighting for Inbar to return. Because Inbar is not alive.
Israel's far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir joined the criticism, but for other reasons, and threatened to leave the government if it closes the deal.
The deal being forged is a deal of surrender to Hamas. I'm calling on my friend, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, to join me in cooperating together against a deal being forged. My party, Otzma Yehudit, alone does not have the power to prevent the deal, but together we can go to the Prime Minister and inform him that if he passes the deal, we will withdraw from the government.
He adds that over the past year, he managed to stop a deal many times, angering not only the tens of thousands of Israelis who've called for a deal for months, but also the head of the opposition. In response to Ben-Gvir's statement, Yair Lapid posted on X.
For more than a year, I have been saying that they are not reaching a hostage deal for political reasons, and everyone tells me that this cannot be, that it's shocking, and how could I say such a thing? Today, Ben-Gvir released a video and told to the camera, without blinking, the terrible truth.
Meanwhile, talks continue between Hamas and Israel in Doha through American.
Most of us don't know who Yair Lapid is. He's the head of the opposition. In 2 words or 1 word, he's a lowlife. Never finished high school. He was a TV host of a talk show and nice-looking guy, and he's the head of the opposition.
American and Qatari mediators.
Let's get the read from retired 4-star general and Fox News senior strategic analyst, General Jack Keane. General, welcome. So the ceasefire is seen as perhaps delicate at best. What is your assessment of it, sir?
Yeah, well, certainly this is a complicated deal, and it has a certain fragility to it, to be sure. The first part is likely the easiest, but it also has challenges associated with it. It has 3 pieces to it. One is the people exchange, which we've been talking about here, hostages for detainees and prisoners. 33 hostages, but they'll be dealt out over a period of 42 days, 3 or 4 at a time. Given that length of time that's taking, almost 6 weeks, it's fraught with things that could happen that could stop it. So that's challenge 1. The second is territorial. The Israelis have to move from where they are, occupying different parts of the Gaza Strip, just to the buffer zones on the eastern part of Gaza, which borders up against Israel. This is inside of Gaza, though, buffer zones that they have since established since the war began. And then they have about 50 days or so to move out of the southern border with Egypt and Gaza, something they've occupied because they call the Philadelphia Corridor, because they know that's where all the tunnels were and all the smuggling of weapons and munitions has taken place over time, and something they're very concerned about. They have conceded to move out of there, and they have that amount of time to do it. And then the third thing is humanitarian relief, up to 600 humanitarian trucks a day, something that people certainly need. But again, for our audience to understand, Hamas is going to take a part of that. They'll take as much fuel as they need. They'll take as much food, not just for themselves, but to sell it back to the Gazans. And this has been going on, for years. The second phase is really the challenge. And remember, so our audience understands, the reason why the hostages were taken in the numbers they were taken by Hamas, unprecedented before, is come down to this point. Hamas wants to survive, and they're going to use those remaining hostages, the second tranche, some 60 plus of them, some of which are dead, for their survival. In other words, on the table will be Israel will have to get out of Gaza and end the war, or the hostages are not going to be released. That is the tension point, and it will be there real and live. And that brings into question whether that second phase is going to happen or not. I mean, I know for a fact that the Israelis want to stay in Gaza for a multi-year occupation to ensure that Hamas not only is destroyed, but does not rise again. And the agreement in this deal is to go and move out of Gaza completely, and then certainly end the war. The negotiations for that, Mike, begin on the 16th day. So starting on Sunday is day one. 16 days later, the negotiations for phase two, which is the real challenge, begins then. And we'll see what happens as a result of that.
Maybe a very bumpy ride ahead. General Jack Keane, grateful for your time and your analysis today, sir.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I thought that was very, very informative. I want to give you my take on this deal. First of all, I have trust in Donald Trump. And I've talked about the fact that after he won the Republican primary, Sullivan, of course, Qatar is a terrorist regime, and I'll get to them in a minute. And of course, Hamas is a deadly enterprise. I don't really like this deal very much, to be perfectly honest with you. And it comes down to me to the fact that essentially 3,000 terrorists are going to be released in 3 phases if this thing holds up. And the Prime Minister of Qatar confirmed that 33 hostages will be released. This is the Jerusalem Post. The women and children first, followed by the female soldiers, then men over the age of 50, young men who are defined as humanitarian cases. They let them live, so they're humanitarian cases. In exchange, Israel will release about 2,000 convicted terrorists, including about 250 who were sentenced to life imprisonment because they're killers. In addition, Israel will release about 1,000 terrorists captured after October 7th. 9 sick or injured hostages are to be released in exchange for the release of 110 convicted terrorists serving life sentences for murder. Israel will release 1,000 prisoners from Gaza, all of whom were arrested after October 8th, 2023. None were directly involved on October 7th. Elderly hostages over the age of 50 are being released at a ratio of 27 life sentence prisoners and 31 other prisoners per elderly hostage. So you can see that is 58 terrorists in exchange for 1 elderly prisoner who's Jewish. And it goes on about how they're going to handle this, and it is a grotesque use of hostages. And that's the other thing that bothers me a great deal. This is dealing with terrorists that is sanctioned by the United States. Dealing with terrorist regime that promises to do more hideous, massive murder against the Jews. That's Hamas's mission. Hamas survives. They survive in Gaza. They will rebuild, or at least try to. They will expand, at least try to. You heard Trey Yingst. I agree with him. And so this is a grave risk for the Israelis who've been pressured to do this, because I doubt Netanyahu would do this on his own, but he's doing it because he's looking at other things. He wants to defeat, also Iran, take out their nuclear sites. We are really their biggest, if not their most important ally, or only ally in a significant way. And it's a tiny little country surrounded by barbarians. And it needs us. But this whole thing, we would never release 3,000 terrorists in exchange for anything. Can you imagine? When we've allowed people to go out of Guantanamo Bay, when Obama did, when Biden did the other week, holy hell. We raised holy hell, didn't we? We said, what are they doing? How could they possibly do? Imagine 3,000. And look what they did to the Jews in Israel, to these 1,200 people. I pulled out the reports. The horrendous, barbaric activity against the women, the gang rapes, the mutilation of the genitalia, the decapitation in front of mothers, cutting open mothers' stomachs and taking the baby out. It goes on and on and on, the horrendous things that took place. And you're sitting down and you're negotiating with these people. You're releasing 3,000 terrorists. This isn't a victory for anybody. I would just remind also the Trump team, the reason why your first-term foreign policy was so magnificent and so successful is that you didn't follow these old formulas, the Biden formulas or any other formulas. You thought out of the box and you did the things you needed to do, and I believe, hopefully from this point forward, that will take place. I'm not one to sit here and say we should scuttle this or that I should use my voice to scuttle it. If this is what the Israeli government and the Trump administration think needs to be done, that's fine. But there are red lines. There must never be two states. There must never be a so-called Palestinian state carved out of Israel. They want to carve it out of Saudi Arabia, go for it. They want to carve it out of Jordan, where the so-called Palestinians were really first existed, then carve it out of Jordan. There's plenty of Arab countries, go for it. But the idea that the Israelis have to surrender their ancestral homelands to enemies is insane. Are they going to have an air force? They're going to have tanks? They're going to have nuclear weapons? Can you imagine? No. That has to be a red line. Also, Iran's nukes. They have to be destroyed. Those nuclear sites have to be taken out. They must be taken out. And if it's our position that Netanyahu and Israel needed to cut this deal, if that's our position, then we need to back them up when they take this enemy on. I do agree. We need to expand the Abraham Accords. I think that's a wonderful thing. But there's a reason why Hamas and Iran and the Hamas front group in the United States CARE are all celebrating this. All of them. There's nothing to celebrate. This was done and it's done. The one saving grace is if Hamas violates any of these phases, shoots any missiles into Israel, Israel can go in and obliterate them. It's my understanding that the Trump administration will permit.
Of course, this is a victory for our people in Gaza. The resistance and the people of Gaza have won at the same time. We are all happy for this victory from God.
Ecstasy in Jordan following the news that Israel and Hamas have reached a ceasefire agreement, with thousands taking to the streets, waving flags of Jordan, Palestine and Hamas, celebrating the people of Gaza.
Of course, we have been waiting for this moment for a long time, and my feelings are indescribable, and I cannot describe my feelings. I ask God to have mercy on the martyrs and to have mercy on all the leaders, and we support them until the last moment.
Similar scenes of happiness in Egypt, where displaced Gazans were hoping this news could bring them back home.
We will restore what was destroyed just as we did in the past and as our ancestors did. We will remain here on this land and will never abandon it. We will never give up a single inch of Palestine. Like the trees, our roots are deep in this land and we will never leave it.
There are no innocent civilians in Gaza. Again, there are no innocent civilians in Gaza. Israel put up an offer of $5 million to any person in Gaza who gives us information leading to the arrest, leading to the discovery of any of the hostages. $5 million, and we will also arrange for your safe passage out of Gaza to wherever you want, just for information to help us find any hostage. Not a single innocent civilian in all of Gaza, over months of that offer, ever came forth to offer any information, and there are those who know. There are no innocent civilians in Gaza.
Celebrations entered the early hours across the Middle East in places like Libya, Tunisia and Yemen, a country where an exchange of fire with Israel is ongoing, with its residents showing cautious optimism over the deal.
This is considered a major victory for the resistance and for the Islamic nation as a whole, and God willing, it will be rightly implemented. And we ask the sponsoring parties of this initiative to be a guarantor for the other party, which is Israel, with full guarantee, because we are used to their violations of agreements and initiatives.
And the Houthis, who are firing at Israel, praised the deal, with a spokesperson saying that the group's battle is reaching its conclusion with a ceasefire. They said that a formal position regarding its attacks on Israel will be announced by its leader Abdelmalek al-Houthi in the coming days. And Iran, the head of the proxy groups, has also claimed victory, with the regime's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei saying that the Palestinian resistance and its proxy army, quote, forced the Zionist regime to retreat. Whilst Western leaders spoke about an end to the fighting and the return of some of the 98 hostages to
I'll
retreat.
give you an extra moment to read that. Oops. It will be written in books that there was a mob who once killed thousands of children and women in Gaza. Everyone will realize it was the patience of the people and steadfastness of Palestinian. There is no such thing as Palestinian resistance and resistance front that forced Zionist regime to retreat. Hashtag Gaza is victorious.
Proxy army, quote, forced the Zionist regime to retreat. Whilst Western leaders spoke about an end to the fighting and the return of some of the 98 hostages held in captivity, the Middle East has shown its allegiance and solidarity with the Gazans and the Gazans alone.
Focus not only on the bastards in the car with the rifles, but the streets lined with innocent Gaza civilians. The importance of all of them raising two fingers, V for victory and not for peace, is that it tells you, not only is it infuriating that they are celebrating this, but it tells you that they're not done fighting. They may take a pause for a second and third phase. They're coming back. It's not like at the end of World War II where the United States bombed the hell out of Dresden, and that was it. No more Nazi government. Nazi government ended, and an entirely new regimen emerged. Or Japan, after Nagasaki and Hiroshima, that was the end of that form of government, and an entire new government way of life, textbooks in school changed. By contrast, these guys are still cooking. And it's not just like a small little remnant. They're ready to go back to fight as soon as they get all their all their prisoners. I found this. There's Lubavitcher Rebbe who spoke on about a previous similar hostage deal. For those of you who don't recognize the different languages, the Rebbe is speaking in Yiddish.
Begoli hat ihn gesagt, wie bald lassen die Gewenke einander drehen und wie bald hat das Aid mit ihm gesprochen. Wenn hat sich nicht gekonnt rechnen, wie viel mit der Fahrer Reislassen von dieser Assyrin hat das so getan. Beschaß mir sagt das in Teine und Rachmon el-Islam jeder Rede verweitigt und der Hette Asipur, als in die Gewenke einander Weg aber frei ist, Zeiten hat befreit, 70, tracht bei sich, öfter das der Weg, und sie öfter in die Gewenke einen anderen Weg, und Nefe, Schachas, mit Israel, ich kim, Eilemol, Arachas kam, bekam, es rät sich mehr nicht wegen 70. Hatten angesagt, die Räder und die Schreier in Eretz Akedisch und in Chutzlores soll machen, als Schweig, wer 70 sein, Adrabe, man soll machen, Simches, wie Hilulis, und wir wissen, dass da andere, was diese sibische Tiere, wenn sie das Sof mit Galle sein, bis wann es dann mit Galle gewinnt. Zwischen hat die etliche und 70 gewesen a Timata Halb. Und die, was eine dort nicht gewesen bei Beis Asuri, wegen Unionen von Mabekach, was a viele wegen Unionen von Mabekach hat nicht angehalten, die Schiete, Jorno Hanan, auf nicht noch geben sich in die Jumi von Terroristen. Ich dort gewesen, Kollege zu halb etlich und 30, und die, was von Befehl sich vernommen, mit Unionen von Meise Hezbollah, bis Meise Hezbollah, was hat gekostet, nicht Porsches Mamas. Das ist der richtige Tag mit den Teilen wie Chulu, was hat die davon gemacht, das so? Da konnte ich Atchile sagen. Aber wie der Meise ist Befehl, und auf dem hat kein Brede nicht mit der Teilen Pschuten, Zahlen Kmusse wie Chulu, muss nach Riesel, nach Monil-Islam, nach Ratschan, was sagt Befehl ist, auch halt die Wege Leid, heuer ist hier. Das am meisten, was wir können, haben zurück. Die etliche und 70 gefühlen sich bekopft. Und gefühlen sich in dem Mord, was Rahman al-Islam heuer Lissie, wir setzen nicht gesieben, aber sollen sich nicht mit Stadel sein, noch einmal heuer Lissie. Komur, in Friedrich ist wahr, dass der Charles Rahman al-Islam mich speit. Und weiß, dass sie gespiegen im Pfanne. Sagt mir in einer zweiten, dass gisch mit Brache. Und heißt soll machen a Brache, der Teve Hameti, nicht a Brache Befehl, machen a Bankett, machen a Maseltov, soll tanzen in die Gassen. Und nur wegen vorne mit allen Sachen, was sind damit verbunden.
And remember the Lubavitcher Rebbe was talking only about a release of 70, of whom 30 or so were murderers. How much more so now, 1,000, 2,000, where the vast majority are not only murderers, but with multiple life sentences. So we now move on to other subjects. Everything is from the past week. Some of the clips that we're talking about, that they're about to sign a deal, were earlier in the week. We've been talking about how Hamas hides their fighters and their weapons in schools and hospitals, in mosques, and now in cemeteries. Then when Israel attacked a hospital, war crime, a school, war crime. They're even bombing graves, war crimes. We'll move forward for time reasons, but it's unbelievable. Or it is believable. Those of us who have been following it, it's believable. Now we move up north. There is no sound in this clip. With the fall of Assad and the ISIS or Al-Qaeda group starting to come in now, there's currently utter chaos and anarchy in Syria. We've covered it the last 2 weeks. And it gives Israel an opportunity, while everybody's in chaos, to clear out as many weapons as they can, destroy launchers. Israel's been clearing stuff out so that, for example, if Israel wants to bomb in Syria, or if they want to fly over Syria en route to Iran, the anti-aircraft defenses in Syria no longer are there. Putin has pulled out all Russians. Putin has pulled out Russian anti-aircraft and other material from Syria, because unlike Biden and Harris, who left all of our stuff in Afghanistan for the ISIS to take, or whatever they are, Taliban, to get billions of dollars of American military materials, Putin, a little bit smarter, has moved all this stuff out into Libya, because this stuff now otherwise could be taken by ISIS and Al-Qaeda and used against Russians and against whatever. So Putin's moved it out to Libya, and that has really helped Israel clear out Syria. A footnote story should not be a footnote, but today's a crazy day with the hostage thing. This lady, there was a fellow named Oron Shaul, who together with another Hadar Golden were Israeli soldiers in a previous war who were killed during battle, and Hamas refused to give up their bodies. And it's been 5-6 years or whatever. Hamas won't give up their bodies, and to the shame and discredit of the Israeli government, the return of those bodies was not included in the negotiated agreement. After all these years, what it must be like for families whose sons died as soldiers in IDF, Tzahal, fighting for Israel, killed, reading that there is now a deal that will return some of the bodies from a year ago, 2023, and that the government did not even include their sons in the deal. As it happens, though, the day before or 2 days before the deal went into effect, IDF soldiers still fighting in Gaza, because the ceasefire had not yet begun, came upon the body of Oron Shaul. So they found him just in time, and they've just brought him back. And this is his mother talking to the media.
מודה לכם. אני כבר 10 שנים וחצי מחכה לאורון.
In a year and a half, I've been waiting for Oron.
ותאמינו לי שאני לא האמנתי שאני אגיע לרגע הזה.
And believe me, I never thought I would ever reach this moment that we'd see his body returned.
ואני כולי בצמרמורות. אני רוצה להודות לכל אלה שעשו את המאמץ העילאי הזה.
I want to thank all those who performed this incredible effort
והחזירו לי את אורון, מה
and brought me back my son Oron.
שחשבתי שזה לא יקרה.
Something I thought never would happen.
והנה זה קרה. אני מתרגשת מאוד. קשה
And behold, it did happen. I'm deeply emotional.
לי אפילו לדבר.
Difficult for me even to tell you how I feel.
ואני מודה מאוד לראש הממשלה ולמערכת הביטחון וכל...
I want to thank completely the Prime Minister and the security establishment.
אלה שעשו את המאמץ להחזיר לי את אורון ולכל החיילים שהיו איתם, ואני מודה מאוד לכל אלה שעשו את המאמץ והחזירו לי את אורון.
So I completely thank so much all those who did this. What you're seeing here is that she's waited 10 years.
ואני מקווה שיחזירו את כל החטופים שעדיין נמצאים בעזה, וכל הפצועים שיהיה החלמה מהירה.
And, you know, I'd like to see all the other hostages come back from Gaza and the healing of all the soldiers who've been injured and wounded.
ותודה לכם. תודה רבה.
אוהבים אותך זהבה.
Strong winds tonight in Southern California.
Now I'm going to cover the
אני מכבדת את המעמד הזה.
Now I'm going to cover.
אוהבים אותך זהבה.
Everything across the street from the synagogue burnt down, but the synagogue is still here.
I found this just fascinating. Just fascinating. The only thing that survived that entire block and several blocks is this one Jewish house of worship.
What's it like to see it? Surreal.
Unbelievable.
Seeing the Kehillat Israel synagogue standing amid so much devastation is staggering. Look at this. This is the ash that came through the door?
Yeah.
Los Angeles continues to face tragic and deadly fires which have claimed the lives of at least 16 people, have destroyed over 12,000 buildings, and have displaced more than 150,000 Californians. Additionally, there's no power for over 90,000 residents of the area. As over 1,400 firefighters battle the ongoing blaze caused by the strong, dry Santa Ana winds, there have also been reports of arson and mass lootings of evacuated homes. One of the worst fires, the Palisades fire, has ravaged over 5,000 buildings and homes in the area. Yet miraculously, Kehillat Israel, a local synagogue, managed to survive the fire. Now, the synagogue is not only serving as a symbol of hope in the neighborhood, but also as a refuge for evacuees. In fact, the Los Angeles Jewish community is stepping up across the city, hosting meals and welcoming in evacuees from all over. Unfortunately, not everyone is stepping up to the tragic fires with the same generosity and support. Almost immediately following the outbreak of the fires in California, anti-Israel activists, organizations, and even states began comparing the LA fires to the situation in Gaza, with some even celebrating the fires. Social media posts expressing sympathy for the people in LA who've lost their homes were riddled with comments not only attempting to make the story about Gaza, but in many cases even celebrating the devastation in LA. HTS, the Islamic...
Pausing a moment so you can read it. We must also acknowledge how exorbitant amounts of excess carbon emission have been produced because of the US-made Israel bombs used to genocide Palestinians. No such thing as Palestinians, they're Arabs, in Gaza. We live on one planet.
Islamist group which overthrew Assad in Syria made a post claiming the fires were justice, while social media influencers like Khaled Safi implied the fires were payback for Gaza. Official regime media from the Islamic Republic of Iran also praised the fires, calling them God's revenge for Gaza and Lebanon. And celebrities like Jamie Lee Curtis also made the crude comparison.
Jamie Lee Curtis did not mean bad. Jamie Lee Curtis said, "It looks like Gaza." She was not attacking Israel and what Israel's done in Gaza, just saying the only way I can describe what it looks like is it looks like Gaza. She's been taken out of context as though she was being anti-Israel, or that's not what she meant. She was just finding she could just as well have said it looks like Dresden, but she probably doesn't know the history.
Shortly after the fires broke out, notorious anti-Israel group Code Pink posted a video lobbying in U.S. Congress on the connections between the wildfires and what they called the Gaza genocide. Because apparently nothing in the world can happen without it being about Palestinians. Climate change, Black Lives Matter, women's rights, the Olympics, COVID-19, LGBTQ rights, even Christmas. Palestinian activists have attempted to hijack every single one of these issues to make themselves the focus, without any regard for the suffering or needs of others. Believe it or not, not everything is related to Palestinians. Not everything that takes place needs to be hijacked to make Palestinians the center of attention.
On top of all that, there is no such thing as Palestinians. They are simply Arabs from Gaza, Judea and Samaria.
There is a deadly plague sweeping over Great Britain. This cancerous plague threatens everything: our nation, our culture, our values, and everything we hold dear. If it is not stopped, we might lose our homeland forever. This terrible disease is bigotry. That is why, as proud citizens of Great Britain, we must all keep a stiff upper lip and do our part to avoid bigotry, racism, and Islamophobia. Here are just a few helpful tips to help you avoid the stain of bigotry whilst you're being raped, stabbed, or blown up by Pakistani migrants. When an Islamic migrant approaches you and begins repeatedly thrusting a knife into your torso or face area, remember this: white British citizens sometimes stab people too, and you should be ashamed of yourself for thinking people stabbing is a Muslim thing. While the attacker stabs you, close your eyes and try to picture him as a white male. This simple meditation will help your bias melt away like clotted cream on a toasty, crumpeted tea time. Cheers, old boy. You've done it. If you are a woman, always remember to wear modest clothing. Ideally, clothing should cover your legs, your ankle, your face, your eyes, and everything else. Take a look at Elizabeth here. Now that's an attractive and safe look for England's streets. Failing to wear the proper attire could lead to men of undetermined religion and national origin succumbing to their baser instincts, making you a target. So, do the right thing for England and cover up. That a girl, Elizabeth. Avoid regressive and offensive British terms, such as cheerio, codswallop, or throw a wobbly. Instead, use more inclusive terms, such as Allahu Akbar, or Allahu, or death to Israel. This makes British Muslims feel welcome. If you've done all these things and still have feelings of bigotry, simply submit to the Holy Quran and acknowledge Muhammad as the one true prophet of Allah. Then, follow all the tenets of Islam, pray 5 times per day facing Mecca, and maybe even stab another British person while shouting Allahu Akbar. Congratulations! You have completely rid yourself of the stain of bigotry. And as the evil dictator Winston Churchill once said, keep calm and carry on.
Turning our attention to the devastating wildfires in Los Angeles and Israeli technology that may be able to make a difference. You've heard of the Iron Dome, Israel's missile defense system, but have you heard of the Firedome? Founded back in 2024, not so long ago, by CEO Gadi Benjamini and Dr. Adi Naor Pomerantz, Firedome is developing a wildfire defense system modeled on the Iron Dome. So to tell us more, we welcome Gadi Benjamini, the CEO of Firedome. Gadi, this is fascinating. Thank you for your time. So the Iron Dome defense system has obviously saved countless lives in Israel, tracking and intercepting incoming rockets. So talk us through how the Iron Dome inspired you to come up with a system to fight wildfires.
Thank you very much, Benita, for having me. And first, I would love to send my regards and thoughts to the brave men and women that are fighting the fires in LA. It is a devastating chain of events, and we're following it carefully and hoping that in the next fires we'll be able to, introduce the product and make some and assist them. Well, Iron Dome inspired us in so many ways. I mean, I have a very long military background. I was in the army for about 14 years. And I always looked for the intersection between technology and protection and safeguarding our communities. And Iron Dome does just that. As Iron Dome intercepts the missiles that approach Israel from different areas, we at Firedome are inspired and are making our system work the same way by intercepting spot fires and wildfires that are approaching assets and communities and protecting people. We also have one of the founders of the Iron Dome, Mr. Pini Jungmann, on our advisory board, helping us to implement the methodology and technology into Firedome. And hopefully in the coming months, we'll have it by fruition and it will be able to save people's lives and save communities.
Obviously, time is of the essence as we watch that footage out of LA. It's terrifying indeed. So talk us through the challenges in the climate tech area. How does this AI-powered technology help firefighters tackle a spate of rapidly spreading blazes all at the same time?
So what we see now in these terrible fires in LA are a combination of very strong winds that are all the time changing the direction. And that we have the firefighters have to battle these fires day and night, and some of the tools that they have are not fit for fighting the fire when strong winds are occurring or when the dark time arrives. So what we do there in Firedome is, first of all, we create 2 layers of protection around the property. The first layer of protection gives you a barrier, a fire break around the property. You can see it here in the picture, in the white circle, and around the 360 around the property. And the second thing that we do is, using AI, using computer vision, we detect spot fires. These are fires that are emerged from embers that fly miles away in the strong winds. They attach to the building, they attach to the vegetation on the property and create new small fires. We identify these fires within seconds with our computer vision algorithms, and then launch a capsule filled with fire retardant to suppress them. This process takes a few seconds. So the fire stays very, very small, and we suppress it when it's very, very small and doesn't spread out to destroy the house, to destroy the property, to destroy the vegetation. That is how we're utilizing AI here to our benefit, that's how we can protect more assets and help firefighters gain time, better allocate their resources, and hopefully save communities from these terrible wildfires that are going to be even worse because of climate change.
Absolutely devastating looking at those images as you are speaking. You say it's just a few months out. I've got 10 seconds left. How long until it's fully operational at this juncture? What are you thinking?
So end of 25, beginning of 26 will be the first pilots that we'll have in the US, and before that we will test the system here in Israel.
There's so much to be proud of as Jews, Zionists who love Israel, the stuff that comes out of Israel, unbelievable. And all I can think of is that if Ben Cohen or Jerry Siegel or Ben and Jerry ever have their homes on fire and this thing is available, I hope that they'll be saying, we can't accept that. We'll have to let our houses burn down because we support boycotting Israeli products.
Chairman Mast, thank you very much for this interview. First of all, congratulations.
This past week saw the beginnings of the Senate committee hearings of proposed new appointees in the new incoming American administration. So this is 2 or 3 snippets of some of what went on this past week that applies to us as Jews in the past week's Jewish events. Bryan Mast, congressman in Florida, will become the new chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee.
Congratulations on your new appointment as chairman of House Foreign Affairs Committee. You're one of the few people who understand that the head of the snake is Iran, not Hamas, not Hezbollah. What will be your foreign policy against the Iranian regime?
It's what President Trump puts forward, and that's to say maximum pressure. Maximum pressure involves a lot of things, so it's making sure that Israel has the support, and not just the support in terms of what we are sending to be used, but the way that we are there, whether in the Suez Canal or the Red Sea, or take your pick of places, being on the front line, shoulder to shoulder.
What do you think will be the difference in the incoming administration relationship with Israel compared to the previous administration?
I think the difference could be summed up very shortly. Yes will be yes and no will be no. For President Trump, he's not going to play games where it's a half measure because half support is going to Gaza and half support is going to our allies. It doesn't make any sense to support our ally who is at war with our adversary and to support our adversary as well. And in the end, it also creates a situation where you don't beat your adversary to the point that they are ready for a long-lasting peace.
I'd like to ask you a personal question. As someone who almost sacrificed his life for America, where do you get your motivation and strength every morning to stand up and fight for the security of the U.S. and Israel?
My father raised me to believe that way and to live that way and to instill the same thing in my boys and my daughter. We fight for the right causes. Nothing's going to make us back down, and that makes us all American.
But why for Israel?
Well, it's part of the most important causes. I say it in this way many times, that Israel is the most important aircraft carrier for the United States of America anywhere around the globe. Israel is constantly acting as the greatest ally for us in the region. Our common bonds that go beyond not just common enemies, but the way that we look at the world. And so those common grounds and the way that we work together to secure what are common interests for us, it's just the best relationship.
Trump said all of them until January 20, or the fire of hell will open. What do you think he means?
I think he means what he says. All of them. Every body, every person that's alive, every single thing that was touched on October 7, it will be returned. You have until then to get this done. And if you don't, you will realize what it means when President Trump's yes is yes and his no is no.
You moved many Jews worldwide when you appeared after October 7th in IDF uniforms in Congress and received quite a bit of criticism for doing it. Do you think the criticism of the IDF from the Democratic Party and international body like ICC, ICJ...
Again, this guy is going to be the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee.
...are justified?
Absolutely not. Israel is #1 conducting a war of defense. Israel was attacked on October 7, and many people forget this. The enemy has to be defeated to the point that they surrender to the point that they recognize they will never rise again in the way that they have.
You visited before and after October 7th. Is there a special moment that you never forget?
The first time I visited Israel after October 7 was by invitation to go and visit with amputees like myself that had been injured in the war in Gaza.
I didn't realize that till right now. He lost his legs.
And so for me, it was going hospital to hospital, visiting with these individuals and having the opportunity to stand on the bedside where...
I'm just blown away. I had no idea. He was projecting such strength. He still does, but I had no idea that that he lost his legs.
Somebody had stood on the bedside for me before, saying, listen, life's going to go on. You're going to be all right. You're going to get out there and you're going to do everything that you decide to do in life. When you do, you're going to go out there and you're going to affect your country in a way that you didn't have the ability to do it before, so don't let them down. And that was the message to soldier after soldier.
We saw that the Biden administration wanted to prevent Israel from entering Rafah and Lebanon. Prime Minister Netanyahu decided to enter anyway, which led to the elimination of Sinwar and Nasrallah, which you supported. What do you think Israel should do now and in the long run to protect itself?
Don't settle for a premature peace. Because if Israel would have settled when they said, hey, you can't go into Rafah, guess what? All these things wouldn't have happened. If they said, listen, you have to have this war concluded by Ramadan. If you don't have it concluded by Ramadan, then all hell's going to break loose and it's not going to be okay. Israel didn't pay attention to that. And we have Sinwar and we have everything that's happened since.
I know that you have special relations with some Israeli veterans. You send videos to soldiers in Gaza. As an American veteran, what do you think about the Israeli veterans?
I think they're amazing individuals. For all of us that put on a uniform in defense of our country, you're cut from a different cloth. And that's unique and it's special and very few are capable of it and very, even less undertake those actions. And so when you find those brothers and sisters in arms, you find real friends that you can count on.
What message would you like to convey to the Israeli people?
Stay in the fight. Okay. Be vigilant in the fight. And always remember that as you're in this fight, you're not in it alone.
Chairman Mast, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for standing with Israel, and I wish you millions of luck in your new job. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the questions.
Big 22 minutes.
As you know, they had hearings on the proposed new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. Obviously, this is not on our Sunday program a basis to focus about the whole interview, but the part about Israel, the part Jews.
We've got a big audience here. Many of them seem to be patriotic supporters of you, Mr. Hegseth. Some of them seem to be liberal critics of you. I would note that it's only the liberal critics that have disrupted this hearing. As was my custom during the Biden administration, I want to give you a chance to respond to what they said about you. I think the first one accused you of being a Christian Zionist. I'm not really sure why that is a bad thing. I'm a Christian. I'm a Zionist. Zionism is that the Jewish people deserve a homeland in the ancient Holy Land where they've lived since the dawn of history.
Of course, this is Senator Cotton.
Do you consider yourself a Christian Zionist?
Senator, I'm a Christian, and I robustly support the state of Israel and its existential defense, and the way America comes alongside them is a great ally.
Thank you. Because another protester, and I think this one was a member of Code Pink, which, by the way, is a Chinese Communist front group these days, said that you support Israel's war in Gaza. I support Israel's existential war in Gaza. I assume, like me and President Trump, you support that war as well, don't you?
Senator, I do. I support Israel destroying and killing every last member of Hamas.
And the third protester said something about 20 years of genocide. I assume that's our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Do you think our troops are committing genocide in Iraq and Afghanistan?
Senator, I do not. I think our troops, as you know, as so many in this committee know, did the best they could with what they have. We're not the outcomes, and tragically, the outcome we saw in Afghanistan under the Biden administration put a stain on that, but it doesn't put a stain on what those men and women did.
If you're in the United States on a visa and you support Hamas, should you be deported? Well, this is a question that was asked to this clip.
Thank you. Since October 7th, there's been a disturbing rise
As you know, Marco Rubio has been proposed as Secretary of State.
And anti-Semitism, pro-terrorist violence in our cities, on college campuses. You and I had the opportunity to write an op-ed together. And in that op-ed...
McCormick is the new United States Senator from Pennsylvania, I think. He's the one who just knocked out the previous one who'd been there for 2 terms.
We called on foreign nationals who support Hamas.
The ramification of Republicans winning several Senate races that were so important changed the dynamic in the Senate and House.
Or other terrorist organizations to lose their visas and to be sent back to their home countries. As Secretary of State, of course, you'll be responsible for overseeing the issuance of visas. How will you enforce our laws to ensure that we remove supporters of terrorist groups from our country?
Listen, my view on this is one of common sense. Okay, if you apply for a visa to come into the United States, and in the process of being looked at, it comes to light that you're a supporter of Hamas, we wouldn't let you in. If we knew you were a supporter of Hamas, we would not give you a visa. So now that you got the visa and you're inside the U.S. and now we realize you're a supporter of Hamas, we should remove your visa. If you could not come in because you're a supporter of Hamas, you should not be able to stay on a visa if you're a supporter of Hamas. That's how I view it. And I think that's just an issue of common sense. And we intend to be very forceful about that.
My view is that now is the moment for Israel to return to its founding premise. The Jewish state has an absolute right to exist. A divine gift, gifted to a divine nation, charged with a divine purpose. Israel has an absolute and unequivocal right and responsibility to defend itself to the fullest, applying the only language that its adversaries understand, the language of force. So what would David Ben-Gurion say today? He would say, don't depend on anybody else's fleeting sympathies or permission to do it. If Israel wants to destroy Hamas, Israel should go ahead and destroy Hamas. I'm just getting started. If Israel wants to destroy Hezbollah, Israel should go ahead and destroy Hezbollah. If Israel and Mossad want to pull off Munich 2.0 and take out every last leader of Hamas, wherever they may be hiding from Doha to Dresden, host a red wedding at the Four Seasons in Qatar, the next time Haniyeh and Mashal show up, they should go ahead and do it. If Israel wants to, at long last, abandon the myth of a two-state solution, Israel should go ahead and abandon a two-state solution. The rest of the Arab world can absorb Palestinians just as the Jews absorbed their people out of 22 countries they were kicked out of since 1948.
And a Christian mother of 6, an activist, Reverend Haley Ace, has traveled to Israel despite threats from Hamas and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, boldly declaring if Israel fails, the West will fail. ILTV's executive editor Mayan Hoffman met with Ace last week in Jerusalem. Let's take a look.
Reverend Haley Ace has been threatened by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and Hamas agents in London. She's been harassed on the street for wearing a Jewish star necklace, though she is not Jewish, and attacked on social media for standing up for Israel. Despite these threats, Ace, a mother of 6 living in London, arrived in Israel last week to stand in solidarity with the Jewish people.
We cannot let fear hold us back from doing the right thing. Fear cannot be the reason we don't do it, because there is right and there is wrong, and we have to be brave and strong.
Ace is one of London's most well-known Christian activists for Israel. She's the founder of Christian Action Against Anti-Semitism and was named among the 50 Christian allies for Israel last year. Ace arrived in Israel on Thursday to create content aimed at fighting the propaganda war and inspiring her network of Christians, what she calls the silent majority. She will remain in Israel until the 20th. Her itinerary is packed. It includes visits to war-affected sites, meetings with Israeli political and military leaders, encouraging soldiers on army bases, and exploring the Old City and other Christian sites significant to her faith. On Thursday, Ace spent the day with 9-year-old Ben Carasso, the spokeskid of Israel. Following the events of October 7th, Ben felt compelled to help his country by sharing Israel's story with the world through the eyes of a child. After their visit, Ben and Ace met with ILTV at the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. The young boy described the older advocate as amazing.
אחרי שנשיא בית הדין הבינלאומי לצדק בהאג מונה לראש ממשלת לבנון, המועמד...
You all know about the International Court of Justice, which is a court of injustice, the International Criminal Court, which is basically a court of criminals. Through the natural political process by which they run, their current president of that court, term is up, steps down, and now the next president of the court will begin her term. As it just so happens, the new president is the only one who sits on the entire court who is pro-Israel. When they voted on whether to call Israel guilty of genocide and war crimes, they were all but unanimous. Only the Israeli representative and this one other woman, I think she's from Uganda, voted on behalf of Israel. And as circumstances would have it, she's the new president. She'll be sitting on the term of the court as the president of the court. And it's obviously during this term that the Israel International Court situation will become resolved one way or another. Either they're going to go forward and have their arrest warrants, or with the new American administration cutting off all funding and denying visas to people to come to America and whatever else, it's going to resolve, and it's helpful to have her.
עומדת להחליפו, מציגה מדיניות פרו-ישראלית, נתי לנגרמן, ויש כבר ניסיונות ראשונים לסיכול המינוי.
כן, אז אולי אנחנו לקראת שינוי מרענן בבית הדין הבינלאומי לצדק בהאג, אחרי שהנשיא הלבנוני מונה לראש ממשלת הלבנון וכבר הספיק לכנות.
It's a time for a change of a president of the court, because the outgoing president has just been elected to be the president of Lebanon. Therefore, he had to give up a seat.
את ישראל מדינת אויב, מי שצפויה להיות הנשיאה בפועל של המוסד הזה היא ג'וליה סבוטינדה מאוגנדה, אותה שופטת.
Yeah, so she's from Uganda. The name is Julia Sabuya, something like that.
שעמדה לצד ישראל בהליכים השונים שנועלו נגדה בבמה הזו, בין היתר העתירה
She has stood on Israel's side.
של דרום אפריקה, עתירות שונות בנוגע ליהודה ושומרון וכיוצא בזה. אם המינוי שלה לא יסוכל, היא עשויה להיות הנשיאה בפועל של בית הדין עד לשנת 2030, ואנחנו מביאים הערב את הציטוט.
Sounds like her term would be until 2030, a 5-year term.
הציטוטים החריגים שלה בנוף הזה של עולם המשפט הבינלאומי, שמכירים בין היתר בזכותה של מדינת ישראל לחלקים מיהודה ושומרון ועוד, וכך היא אומרת לפני פחות.
She has been supportive of Israel, even being in parts of Judea and Samaria.
פחות משנה ביחס ליהודה ושומרון. יש לדרוש התייחסות שונה לאזורים בהם היה רוב יהודי לפני 1948, היא מתייחסת למזרח ירושלים, לגוש עציון, דרישה לנסיגה מיידית.
She makes the argument that there was a Jewish majority there before 1948 in Judea, Samaria, and Israel. Whenever the others demand an immediate Israeli withdrawal without any condition, she goes forward and she says that it's different because you've got to understand that Israel's had a majority there since before 48 in Judea, Samaria.
ידית כוללת וללא תנאים מצד ישראל תהיה שוות ערך להכחשת טענות משפטיות שיש לישראל בגין אותם מקומות. עוד היא אומרת שאי אפשר להתעלם מהאיום הקיומי שמציבים השטחים הפלסטיניים למדינת ישראל.
She has said that it's impossible to turn away or ignore the existential threat and the dangers, the security dangers that apply to Israel from the so-called Palestinian territories. No such thing as Palestine. It's Judea, Samaria. And so she says that critically that this court continually focuses on negatives about Israel and ignores all the merits of Israel.
היחידה מבין כל השופטים שמתייחסת לנקודה הזו בעתירות השונות, ולסיום היא אומרת שמקומם של עתירות כאלו הדורשות נסיגה חד צדדית של ישראל מהשטחים הכבושים במרכאות מקומן בשולחן המשא ומתן ולא בבית הדין בהאג.
So she's opposed to any pressure on Israel to give up Judea and Samaria. She believes it should be left for negotiations between the sides. I'm going to move on.
תודה רבה.
And so these words,
and now we conclude.
We pray for the brave soldiers. We pray for the civilians and soldiers who have been captured, and we pray for Geula.
Underscore that these are Jews in this is the South African Jewish community living in maybe the worst country in the world right now, side by side with Ireland, two most anti-Semitic countries in the world, at least their governments. Ireland is anti-Semitic throughout, government and the population. South Africa is much more complicated. Their leaders are anti-Israel. The public probably doesn't even give a hoot one way or the other. And there are many South Africans that are supportive of Israel, but this is a nation that, and it's the story of the Jewish people, even in their own places of danger, praying on behalf of Jews elsewhere in the world. Thank everybody for being here today. I hope that you've got new tools and weapons to use in understanding what's going on, discussing it with other people, letting them know what's really going on, and understanding. On top of that, again, as I said at the outset, I've put a 20-minute statement on YouTube, and you can find it. If you're on our list, you already received the link last night. If you're not on the list and want to be on the list or want the link, just drop us a note. And we thank you all for being here today. Again, this is Rabbi Dov Fischer of Young Israel of Orange County. If you're seeing this for the first time on YouTube itself, we ask that you consider both, number one, sending the link to additional people you know and subscribing to the channel.